Welcome to Bodhicitta Dakini Monastery. Today's Dharma talk is about finding your true home. So there is the story of Selkies in the Faroe Islands, the Shetland Islands, and Scotland. And basically Selkies are mythical creatures that are seals, big seals, and they can come to shore and turn into people. And there's different stories about them. Basically, when they become human, they're incredibly beautiful, and they shed their skin, and then they can take human form. But if they lose their skin, the danger is they will be stuck on land, and they won't be able to return to the ocean. And I think it's a metaphor for human beings' wild nature, for the fact that we are part of nature, that we have a almost magical relationship with nature, and for the wild selves that we've forgotten by living in civilization. But also the selkie, the wild nature is perhaps a spiritual peace that we're sometimes alienated from. Anyway, there was once some beautiful selkies who were women, female, and they came to shore one day, and they were just playing along the shore, and a village man saw them, and he saw where they had put their skins, and he instantly fell in love with one of them. She was so beautiful. Her hair was just touching the ground, and she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. So he did something a little bit dishonorable. He stole her skin so that she wouldn't be able to return to the wild. And when all her friends put on their skins and returned to the ocean, she was stuck there alone. And he came up to her and he said, stay with me for 7 years, be my wife. And if you are not happy after 7 years, you can return to the wild. And she was curious about him. She was curious about human beings and a different kind of life. But she also didn't have a lot of choice because he had stolen her skin. So they got married and they lived together. He was a fisherman and he would be gone at sea for long periods of time. And she would spend her days keeping the house, looking after animals, and taking long walks along the ocean. But she always heard the sound of the sea and felt a longing to return to her people. And after some time, she gave birth to a daughter and a son. And the children born of selkies and humans have webbed hands. But after many years living the life of a human being, the woman started to ail, to become sickly, and to just be gone all day walking by the ocean. And her husband, who had come to love her, knew that she needed to return to the sea or she would die of sadness. So he said, I'm sorry that I didn't understand your need to be in the wild, because that is your nature. And I'm sorry I tried to tame you and separate you from your sacred self, from your people, from your connection to the wild. And so he gave her back her skin, and she embraced him and her children and went back into the ocean. But every year around the full moon, she would come back and be with her children for a day and then return to the wild. So, yeah, I think there is a part of all of us that longs to return to a better time, or to find meaning, to find our place of belonging in the world, and to find peace, to be united with our better selves. And, there's a part of us that looks up at the stars at night and kind of goes, just has a sense of awe, has a sense of wonder. And in our workaday life, sometimes we lose that sense of wonder. We become, our mind becomes a little bit small. And that's it can wear you out, that kind of routine, that sense that magic is not quite present because we're forced to stick ourselves into a box. And that is why we follow a spiritual path, or that's why we go and commune with nature, because we feel a longing to return to true peace, to return to a sacred relationship with all of life. And as well as, the spacious, luminous mind that is our birthright, as well as peace, as well as beauty, there is, a lot of pain and war and tension in the world, and a lot of greed. Because we don't see interbeing, we forget that others are our second self, and we forget the impact we have on others as we go about our lives. That, the very fact that we can go on a holiday or find some peace in meditation is because others went through a great deal of hardship to give us a human life. Someone carried us in their body for 9 months. Probably both our parents worked very hard in jobs they didn't always enjoy to support us, and would have gladly given their life for us. And there are people who care for us, who grow our food and so forth. And we just often don't have a sense of gratitude or connection to see that everything is supporting us, that in fact nature wants to give. Nature gives, the bees give, the flowers give. They exist in interrelated, in interbeing, in a relationship. So when we're violent, it's an aberration because it harms us, it harms the people that we are violent towards, but it also betrays the natural order, which is actually, the natural order can also be violent though, in terms of the survival of the fittest. But in terms of that relationship that we all have, and we all depend on each other, it betrays that sacred relationship that we have. And that is why we have the 5 mindfulness trainings for an ethical way of life, for a peaceful way of life, and for a more joyful way of life, so that we feel safe with each other, basically, and we don't harm each other. It actually makes a huge difference. So the 5 mindfulness trainings are understanding that life is sacred and that every being cherishes their own life, don't kill. Understanding that people work hard for what they have, don't take what is not freely given, don't steal. Understanding that sex has to have consent and can be a beautiful thing in the right context with love. But also understanding that certain people are either not ready for that, like protecting children from what they're not ready for, and also respecting the vows that other people have. So not to do harm with your sexual energy, and not to use harsh speech or unkind words or betray people with your speech, and to not take alcohol, drugs, and intoxicants too much that cloud the mind, and that stop you from living with good health and a fresh mind. And so killing, stealing, right speech, and killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, and alcohol and intoxicants. But there's a really nice way they teach that at Plum Village, which is, I should have looked it up before, the 5 mindfulness trainings. Okay, so the first, oh dear. These are the 14 mindfulness, sorry. Okay, so aware of suffering caused by the destruction of life, I'm committed to cultivating compassion and learning ways to protect the lives of animals, plants, and minerals. I am determined not to kill and not to let others kill, and not to support any killing in the world, in my thinking or my way of life. The second mindfulness training is aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, and oppression. I'm committed to cultivating loving kindness and learning ways to work for the well-being of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I will practice generosity by sharing my time, energy, and material resources with those who are in real need. I am determined not to steal and not to possess anything that should belong to others. I will respect the property of others, but I will prevent others from profiting from human suffering or the suffering of other species or the earth. Aware of the suffering caused by sexual misconduct, I am committed to cultivating responsibility and learning ways to protect the safety and integrity of individuals, couples, families, and society. I am determined not to engage in sexual relations without love and a long-term commitment. To preserve the happiness of myself and others, I am determined to respect my commitments and the commitments of others. I will do everything in my power to protect children from sexual abuse and to prevent couples and families from being broken by sexual misconduct. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others, I am committed to cultivating loving speech and deep listening in order to bring joy and happiness to others and relieve their suffering. Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I am determined to speak truthfully with words that inspire self-confidence, joy, and hope. I will not spread news that I do not know to be certain, and I will not criticize or condemn things of which I am not sure. I will refrain from uttering words that can cause division or discord, or that can cause the family or community to break. I am determined to make all efforts to reconcile and resolve conflicts, however small. And finally, number 5, aware of the suffering caused by unmindful consumption, I am committed to cultivating good health, both physical and mental, for myself, my family, and my society, by practicing mindful eating, drinking, and consuming. I will ingest only items that preserve peace, well-being, and joy within my body, my consciousness, and the collective body and consciousness of my family and society. I am determined not to use alcohol or other intoxicants, or to ingest food or items that contain toxins, such as certain TV programs, magazines, books, films, and conversations. I am aware that to damage my body or my consciousness with these poisons is to betray my ancestors, parents, and society, and future generations. I will work to transform violence, fear, anger, and confusion in myself and society by practicing a diet for myself and society. I understand that physical and mental well-being is crucial for self-transformation and the transformation of society. So some people might feel like it's a bit too strict, like I enjoy fishing, or I enjoy the odd beer, and that's pretty common in Australia. And the thing about Buddhism is no one's going to tell you thou shalt not, or you're going to go to hell for this. They're not going to judge you. But it's just about living with awareness. And as you practice mindfulness, as you come back to your breath and live in the present moment, I think you probably become a little more sensitive. And you just, through your own wisdom, you become aware of what is beneficial for well-being and what isn't. And each individual has to decide that for themselves, you know, whether it's they're just going to limit themselves to one beer, or whether they're just going to give up totally, you know, or whether they're going to catch fish and put them back, or whether they just realize this isn't good for the fish or good for me. It's a very personal decision. But these are ways that we live with non-violence, that we live with compassion, and you know, that we create peace and the right environment for meditation and peace and well-being. Because you can't really have good meditation while you're cheating on your partner, or while you're selling drugs, or while you're like viciously slandering your neighbors. You know, it's not conducive. And if you look around at most of the conflicts in the world, you'll see that one of the 5 precepts is probably being broken. You know, that people are cheating or stealing or harming each other. Yeah. So this is like a really important foundational, ethics is like a really foundational practice for well-being that a lot of people leave out. You know, people are, they'll talk about like taking a supplement or going to the gym, or, you know, stress reduction meditation, but they won't talk about ethics, you know, because it's seen as something a bit old-fashioned. But I mean, actually it's pretty relevant, you know, how, because we're basically destroying the planet for your generation. So, you know, ethics, doing no harm, is a really fundamental step in being a good human being, and looking at how your actions contribute to the world, whether you're making the world that you're proud of, whether you're making the world that you want to live in, or whether you're making the world a living hell for yourself and others, yeah, by your actions. So, yeah, when we come back to our breath, we can find a lot more peace, and we just become aware of thoughts and, you know, the stories we tell ourselves that might lead to unhappiness, like I'm useless, or I'm not good at this, or, you know, kind of we internalize what we hear as children. And as we live with mindfulness, we can put aside the stories and the thoughts that aren't helping us, and cultivate more wholesome, more positive thoughts. You know, and question the thoughts we have in our head, because usually we just take them at face value. Like someone's told us as a child, you know, you'll never amount to anything, and we internalize that, and we play out, we self-sabotage ourselves because we don't believe in our own potential. And also, you know, emotional pain comes up as well, you know, or loneliness or whatever, and we need to learn to kind of sit with that and make friends with that. Just like when a baby is crying, a mother knows how to embrace it. Does it need, she holds it, and the warmth of her body and her attention calms it. And like if a baby is screaming, the mother knows, you know, does it need to be changed? Does it have wind? Does it need to sleep? So likewise with our emotions, we have these crying babies inside us. And rather than kind of just punching a wall, or driving really fast, or doing what some people do when they're angry, we can sit with our feelings and understand, you know, what is at the root of that feeling. And if you know, follow your breath long enough, usually you calm down and you gain some clarity about what is going on. And that way you don't have to act it out. You don't have to perpetuate the violence that someone has given you, some unkindness or some violence that has triggered you. And instead of playing that out, going home and starting a fight with someone for no reason, just because you had a shitty day, you can process your feelings yourself. You know, that's actually part of skillful adulthood, you know, is learning to process our own feelings.
That exact kind of situation is what meditation helps me with, because often if I'm going through a shit time, I just automatically think and build up and get angry and stuff like that. But when I actually stop and either just sit down or meditate, then I more deliberately think and I figure my situation out properly.
Yeah.
I can find what caused it and what I can do to make it better and prevent it from happening.
That's some wisdom
Again,
there.
yeah.
So, yeah, and mindfulness is the energy we generate through the breath, through returning to the present moment, not going with thoughts of the past or fantasies of the future, because the future has not yet come and the past will not. The past is gone, and really the place where life is taking place is the present moment. And if you return to the present moment, a certain kind of peace and well-being comes to you, because you're not. It's like someone who's carrying a lot of rocks, and if you hold up a rock for a long time, your arms will ache. So it's like holding on to past pain or worrying about future suffering. Just holding up the rock, holding the thought, clinging, it creates a lot of tension. If we just put it down and we return to the present moment, there is a lot more peace and joy, and we can connect with some goodness. We can notice the elements that water seeds of happiness in us, like the blue sky or the garden or the bush, a walk in the bush, just returning to the present moment, to the breath. And within, returning to the breath, mindfulness, we get, the other elements of what we call the Eightfold Path, which I think I've already told you about, right? Like right view and right concentration and right action, right speech. They automatically follow on, because when your mind is in the present moment, you have right understanding, which is the first of the Eightfold Path, which is like a summary of the Buddhist teachings. Right understanding means understanding suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, which is purifying the mind and enlightenment, and the path leading to that, which is the Eightfold Path. And then the second is right thought, which is letting go of aversion, too much craving, or indifference, which is like, mostly we look at people who don't affect us, we couldn't care less about them because they neither confirm our existence nor threaten it. But they're just like us, they feel what we feel. They're as worthy of love and life as we are. And based on these ideas of separation, of me being separate from the world, me having a permanent, unchanging self, when in fact the way I exist is only independence upon many causes and conditions, we create karma, action, and action has effects. Yeah. And we kind of get caught in the wheel of birth and death based on unresolved karma. But even in this life, we can create a really big mess, based on our unskillfulness. Yeah, if you don't believe in future lives. So letting go of aversion, letting go of too much craving. Instead of that, we cultivate understanding. Like, why is that person angry? What kind of trauma have they gone through? If we can understand someone, we may not condone their actions, but we can no longer hate them, because everybody is a result of social, political, spiritual, cultural conditions, economic conditions. And if you change their circumstances, they can also change. And when you understand someone deeply, what is motivating them, what they've gone through, it's much easier to understand why they're acting the way they're acting. And based on understanding, we develop loving kindness, we develop compassion instead of aversion and indifference. So right understanding, right thought, and then right speech. So with our speech, we concretize our thoughts and bring actions. Based on harsh words, couples end up divorced. Couples end up even murdering each other, killing each other, really making each other suffer so much. And the things you tell your children really burn into their mind. So right speech is a really important way to create awareness, to create a better life, to create skillful relationships, to create love and water mutual support, solidarity. So instead of harsh speech, dividing people, like, hey, did you hear that she said this about you? And then slandering someone, like making things up about someone that aren't true or exaggerating, and gossip, like meaningless speech, which is pretty much what most of us spend a lot of time doing. Maybe more women than men, I don't know. But just talking trash, basically.
Yeah.
It doesn't uplift us. So sometimes people can be down as well, like, so are you okay? What's going on for you? Watering seeds of happiness in each other, giving each other, lending an ear, encouraging each other, kind words, and like when you're angry, just going and calming down before you have a conversation about, hey, I'm suffering, and instead of blaming someone, actually trying to speak in a way to repair the relationship. I suffer, and this is what I feel, not it's all your fault. Can we talk about this? This is a skill a lot of people don't have. And then, so right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action. So giving up killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, we protect others from harm. We protect the vulnerable, like homeless people, people with mental health issues, refugees. Our government is completely failing to do these things right now. And protecting life. So it's good to take some days where you're vegetarian. I mean, I'm a total hypocrite. I eat meat, but I try to have certain days of the week where I don't eat meat, and
and
eventually
always try and get ethically sourced meat as ethically as it can get.
Yeah.
Not like big packed in farms and stuff like that,
Exactly.
chickens in cages.
Yeah. But it's still
yeah,
a being suffering
it's
and
far
dying.
from perfect. Yeah.
So it's maybe 3 days a week we can be vegetarian and gradually increase it to 4, or for a month or something. And to look at what we purchase and whether it's harming others. Like, how many times has this been around the world? How many fossil fuels were taken? Do I really need it? Could I get it secondhand? Could I get it from a shared online tool shed or something? How many trees, how many animals died so that this could, like, palm oil is a really bad one. They're clearing the Amazon to make palm oil, planting, so getting products without palm oil, using, like, only driving when we need to, that kind of thing. It's a bit hard in Tassie, isn't it? Eventually, yeah, they'll have electric cars, but even that requires a lot of minerals in the battery.
The stuff that goes into the battery.
Yeah. We need to go back to horses and carts.
Especially when there's child labour involved in making the batteries.
And mining and stuff, ripping out open the earth. So just, doing what we can to live a simpler life, and look at our consumption, look at our words, how we talk to ourselves, how we're talking to others, how we're treating our family, our friends. And then, so right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood. So doing a job that doesn't do harm. There are jobs that, for example, mining is not the most ethical
job. Being a diesel mechanic, probably not the best either.
Well, I think you're just maintaining something. You're not necessarily contributing.
Yeah. I'll talk about that later. But
yeah. Like selling drugs, selling weapons, selling human trafficking, selling poison, selling guns. These are all things that are fairly unethical and create a lot of suffering. Whereas, for example, being a teacher, being a doctor, being a nurse, bus driver, planting trees, there are so many jobs that actually benefit people and don't harm them. I would say, being a mechanic is a fairly neutral, like, people need their cars fixed. And actually you're helping them,
We deal with a lot of, like, pollution and stuff like that. And the thing is, you've got to really dispose of it properly.
Yeah.
Like get it recycled where you can, and
Yeah.
not just throw everything into the bin, which is what a lot of people do at my workplace. That's the tough part.
Right. Okay, but I'm sure there are definitely jobs that are worse because you're really just maintaining a system.
Yeah,
and
we're
people,
not manufacturing anything.
Yeah,
we're just
people need trains, people need buses, and people need trucks for now anyway.
Yeah.
Until we find a better solution.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then from living like an ethical life, there is right concentration, right effort to cultivate virtuous states of mind that have not yet arisen, like peace from meditation, like clarity, a direct experience into the nature of peace and our sacred interconnected relationship with all of life. And then positive states of mind like loving kindness, and clearing away unwholesome states like too much craving or too much anger, calming our anger and so forth. And then right mindfulness, which is returning to the present moment, coming back to the breath. When we eat, not just like looking at our phone and eating, because we're just eating, we're just eating that, not enjoying a cup of tea and seeing, hey, there is a cloud in my tea. There is the woman in the Himalayas who picked my tea. We're not having a sacred moment. We're just, mindlessly going through our life. And that's a day that won't come again, So when you eat, just eat. When you work, just work. When you meditate, just meditate. And whatever you do becomes a sacred act.
Do things intentionally.
Exactly. And you become aware of, like, when you're speaking or when you're thinking, like, is this bringing me happiness? Is this bringing me wisdom? Is this giving me a better life? Or is this just making my life chaotic and miserable and violent? Or harsh, Am I being harsh on myself? I think a lot of guys in Australia, they're quite harsh on themselves and with each other, and it's like, maybe someone feels like they're really depressed, or they feel like they need a good cry, and they're like, shut up, shut the fuck up, don't cry, and it's like really unhealthy, like guys killing themselves because they feel they're weak for being human. I don't think it's very healthy. So having compassion for yourself, yeah, and then that leads to the final of the Eightfold Path, which is wisdom, which is really the best part. It's like the the dessert. it's just this sense of lightheartedness, of not carrying the rocks, of being able to put down the burden of too much ignorance, too many negative emotions, because underneath all of our thoughts and feelings there is a lightness, there is a peace. And when you connect with that basic goodness, there is a freedom and a joy and a natural compassion that emerges, and a kind of wisdom that guides you, that in the sense that you know what to do with your life, or that you know how to live in a non-violent, wise, joyful way. Yeah. And you feel a sense of connection to life, It doesn't just happen like that. It takes time. It takes meditation practice, and it, coming into community with other people who live that way. I just noticed when I was in the monastery, I enjoyed mindful conversations with people. Like, people would talk about their feelings and what's going on in their life, but in a really wise way.
Yeah.
And they didn't just get lost in the past or like trauma dump on each other, and I found those kind of conversations about Dharma practice and about life and about peace really uplifting. Because sometimes when people who don't practice come to the monastery and they just kind of, and I don't mind that, but I also need to spend time with people who are more aware, and we lift each other up. Our conversations are uplifting. So I miss those sometimes. I miss, hanging out with people who are practicing a lot. Anyway, that's my Dharma talk. Do you have any questions?
I'm sure I could think of some. No, not really any questions. I feel like I mostly understood and agreed with a lot of the teachings.
Yeah. So this is called the 5 mindfulness trainings and the Eightfold Path, which is a really fundamental foundation.
So what are the 5 mindfulness trainings? Because you gave the talk on the Eightfold Path last time.
Yeah. So don't kill, don't
Oh
steal.
yeah, but like, where do they originate and how do they fit into Buddhism?
So basically, Buddhism has 3 aspects: Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna, which is ethics, concentration, and wisdom. So the 5 mindfulness trainings come into the ethics part.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. And the Eightfold Path would straddle both ethics and concentration and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, next time you come, I definitely won't teach you the same thing again. Yeah.